They chained her as a pleasure animal. Then she looked at me and said, "Take me home."
Frank Marek had no interest in the black market. He wasn't here for entertainment, not for women, not for the sick economy that thrived in the lower levels of Hearthrose 6, where poverty and heat kept most people too tired to care what happened in the dark. He was a habitat surveyor, certified by the Intercolonial Infrastructure Bureau, sent to assess dome stability in Sector C8 after an old coolant line fractured during the last tremor. He was good at his work, efficient, quiet, hands always on the right tools, eyes scanning structures, not people. That's how he kept himself detached. He didn't like being here. The corridors of Shea Market were too hot, too loud, too close. Rusted walls wept condensation from the heat vents overhead. The smell, metal, grease, bodies, old water, pressed in his lungs. He adjusted the mask over his nose, even though it did little. His handheld scanner blinked a dull green. Structural stress was registering higher than expected. That was the only reason he descended deeper into the center gallery where the power junctions intersected. Then the shouting started. Frank slowed his pace as the tunnel widened into a commercial rotunda. There were cages built into the walls, dozens of them. Some open-fronted, others sealed with mesh. Every booth had a display light and an uplink scanner for biometric purchasing. He knew the setup. He wasn't a stranger to what went on here. He just didn't look. Today he looked. She was suspended against a tilted metal slab in the center display. Arms locked above her head by magnetic cuffs. Feet just barely touching the floor. Her skin was deep violet, smooth, faintly glowing under the spotlight glare. Her long silver-white hair fell over one shoulder, tangled with beads and fragments of ceremonial thread. She wasn't moving. Her eyes, wide, pale lavender, were half-lidded, but she wasn't unconscious. The merchant beside her tapped a panel, triggering a subtle jolt through her restraints. Her body tensed, not violently, just enough to make her chest rise, enough to remind the crowd that she could react and had no choice but to do so. They laughed. She didn't flinch. Frank didn't want to be near this. He had work to finish. But as he stepped past the edge of the crowd, she moved, just slightly. Her head lifted. Her gaze swept across the room, skipping over everyone, then stopped on him. She looked straight into his eyes, not in panic, not in desperation, like she was waiting. Then she whispered, "Take me home." His body froze. The words were soft, barely above breath, but he heard them. The sound cut through the auctioneer's voice, through the calls and claps, and the noise of generators humming in the walls. She wasn't speaking to anyone else, just him. Frank's heart started to thud harder. His jaw tightened. His first instinct was to leave, get back to the heat lines, log the damage report, file his readings, and forget this place existed. But his feet didn't move. His gaze dropped to her restraint point, standard linkage. Civil use tracking tag embedded in her neck. A glowing registry code stenciled onto the curve of her lower back, half visible where her wrap had been torn away. It wasn't clothing anymore, just strips of ceremonial fabric, slashed to reveal the breast, the hip, the thighs. Her feet were bare, dirty, bruised. He didn't know her name, but she wasn't a stranger. Not anymore. The merchant caught Frank's hesitation. "She got your eye?" He grinned. "New intake. Quiet, mostly. Bit of attitude, but nothing we can't recondition. Pleasure tier pricing. 20% off if you buy untested." Frank stepped forward. He didn't speak, just raised his wrist to the biometric reader. The merchant blinked. "You sure? No demo? No whole period?" Frank's voice came out dry. "Now." A green light flicked on. Transaction complete. Ownership confirmed. The cage hissed open. The restraints disengaged. The girl, no, the woman, slid down the slab. Her legs gave out at first. Frank caught her instinctively. She wasn't dead weight. She shifted just enough to stay upright, using his arm for balance. Her skin was cold and damp. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his jacket. Her breathing was shallow. "Are you injured?" he asked. No, her voice was quiet, controlled, just tired. "Can you walk?" "I will." He guided her out without another word. The crowd didn't protest. They'd seen this before. Another buyer. Another unit claimed. Nothing strange, except Frank's silence. The fact that he hadn't touched her, hadn't spoken more than a sentence, hadn't grinned or ogled. That part stood out, but not enough for anyone to interfere. He took her through back corridors, service routes lined with vent stacks and old conveyor belts. They passed no checkpoints, no patrols, just shadows and machinery. She didn't ask where they were going. She walked barefoot beside him, keeping pace, holding his arm lightly, not for protection, but for balance. Her legs trembled. She never complained. Frank's unit was a single-room shelter built into dome C8 support ring. Standard size for an independent contractor. Metal panel walls. Reinforced sealed door. One bed, one wash station, one heater core. His gear took up most of the left wall. He'd never had a guest. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. She followed. He watched her scan the room. Not like someone who expected comfort. Like someone counting exits. Calculating. Her back remained straight. She stood in silence. Frank removed his jacket and hung it on the peg, then retrieved a folded thermal shirt from his storage bin. He handed it to her. She didn't take it right away. "No rules?" she asked. "You're not property here." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I am on record. I'll fix that." She took the shirt, then turned her back to him and let the remains of her wrap fall. Her body was lean, her skin marked in patches, thin scarring near the ribs, faint bruises at the thighs, restraint lines around her wrists and ankles. She pulled the shirt over her head. It hung low, halfway down her thighs. One shoulder slipped loose. Frank turned to the console and typed a quick command into the registry tool. He located her ID, accessed her status. Pleasure asset, tag active, owner verified. He hesitated. The interface warned him about altering bonded citizen data. Enforcement scans would flag inconsistencies. Deactivation could trigger review. He did it anyway. A click. Her tag pinged, then went dark. She exhaled sharply. "You just broke civil code," she said. "I know. Why?" "Because you're not a thing." She studied him. Her expression didn't soften, but the tension around her shoulders eased. He pointed to the bed. "You can take that. I'll sleep by the heater." She didn't argue. She pulled a blanket from the crate and wrapped it around herself, then sat cross-legged on the far corner of the mattress. Her silver hair spilled over one shoulder. Her legs remained visible beneath the thermal. She didn't hide them. Frank lowered himself beside the heater, cross-legged, checking his scanner out of habit. The leaked data was still active in his wrist log. He could file it later. His eyes drifted to her. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching the room. Quiet. Tense. Her fingers moved slowly over the edge of the blanket, tracing the fabric. Not aimlessly, like she was reminding herself that it was real. "Do you have a name?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Then, Nyreen." He nodded. "Frank." Her gaze flicked to him briefly. "I know," she said. Neither of them spoke again for a long while. But something shifted. She was here, free in the only way this place allowed. And for the first time, Frank wasn't sure what he was supposed to do next. He'd never bought anyone, never crossed this line, but something in him had made the choice. Not pity, not lust. She had looked at him like a person, and he couldn't walk away from that. Frank didn't sleep that night. The room was quiet, too quiet. The hum of the heater filled the silence like background radiation. Every few minutes, he glanced toward the bed where Nyreen lay curled under the blanket, her breathing slow and steady. She didn't speak, didn't move much, but she didn't look afraid either. He stayed seated against the wall, one leg bent, eyes open. He was still processing what he'd done. He hadn't planned it, hadn't even known he was going to act until his wrist was already over the scanner. Buying someone wasn't just unethical, it was dangerous. Bureau protocols forbade direct involvement with bonded assets, even on fringe worlds. But Shade Market didn't care. Ownership was just a data point. Nobody asked what happened after. No one cared if she lived through the night. Frank ran his fingers through his hair, tense. He should have left her there. Should have looked away, filed his report, and gone back to the Dome Registry office like every other worker in this sector. But he didn't, because when she looked at him, she didn't ask for rescue. She asked for recognition, and somehow, that made it impossible to walk away. Morning on Hearthrose, 6 didn't look any different from night. The sky domes were cracked. Most of the upper panels smoked out or covered in tarpaulin. The inside of the district rotated on an artificial schedule. A new day started with a low tone from the environmental monitors and a reset of the digital clocks lining the corridor hubs. When the tones sounded, Nyreen stirred. She shifted under the blanket, the thermal shirt riding up her thighs as she sat upright. Her hair was loose, tangled, falling over her shoulders. Her expression was unreadable. Frank stood and stretched. "You hungry?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she nodded once. He walked over to the warming plate and unpacked one of his ration packs. Hydrated meal paste. Basic nutrition blend. Not much, but it would hold her over. He slid it into the warmer. She looked around again, still scanning the room in slow, measured glances. Not fear. Habit. Her voice came softly. "Where are we?" "My hab unit. Dome C8. Upper Western Block. It's coded under salvage ops, so the scanners don't flag motion unless I leave the building." "You live alone?" It wasn't a question. He nodded. "No partner. No crew. I contract out to the Bureau. Small jobs. Safe work." Nyreen leaned forward slightly, her knees drawn up, arms folded loosely around them. "You didn't ask what I did before." Frank turned toward her. "Didn't think I had the right." She blinked at that. A flicker of something. Maybe surprise. Maybe confusion. "I was a translator," she said. 3 dialects. Therian Core, Tongue, Trade Crest, and Interlink. I worked in embassy halls on Raylos Station. Frank froze mid-motion. "You were diplomatic staff?" "Before the collapse. Before the asset reallocation programs." She said it flatly, like repeating a legal clause she'd memorized to protect herself. "They stripped anyone with dual citizen status. So we were high risk. I wasn't sold for what I knew, just for how I looked." Frank lowered the steaming packet of food onto the crate beside her. He didn't speak. She didn't look away. "Do you want me to serve?" "No." "Do you want to touch me?" "No." She studied his face. "Then what do you want?" He sat down across from her, cross-legged. The heater between them cast a soft glow on the metal floor. "I want you to eat. Washington rest. Speak when you feel like it. Stay quiet when you need to. That's not what most buyers want. I'm not like most buyers." "Why not?" Frank hesitated. Then, "Because I didn't buy a thing. I bought time. A window. To keep someone out of that cage." That was when something changed. She didn't smile. Didn't soften. But she nodded once, slowly, and then, for the first time, she picked up the food herself. She ate in silence. Measured bites. Controlled, but no longer guarded. After eating, she stood and walked to the wash basin. Frank turned away to give her space, but he listened, heard the water splash, heard the rustle of cloth. When he turned back, she was drying her face with his utility towel. Her skin was damp, glowing faintly under the ambient light. She didn't pull the shirt down when it slid high on her thighs. She didn't shrink from his gaze. She watched him watching her, then sat back down. "I need to know something," she said. "You disabled the tag. That means you're flagged. I know. If I'm scanned again, they'll register me as unassigned. I know. They'll come looking. They won't find you." She tilted her head. "You're calm about this. I'm good at staying quiet, at not being seen. You think you can hide me? I know I can." Her lavender eyes held his for a long moment. Then she leaned back against the wall, one leg draped over the other. Her skin shimmered faintly under the heater's glow. The scars at her collarbones caught the light. Jagged, ceremonial marks turned cruel over time. She didn't try to cover them. "You know what they trained us to do when we're off shift?" she asked, voice distant. Frank shook his head. "Sit. Quietly. Don't sleep too deep. Don't speak unless prompted. Always look pleasant, but never eager. Don't frown. It looks ungrateful. Don't smile. It looks manipulative. Keep your hands visible. Keep your legs crossed, never parted, never closed. Everything calculated to be ready, but never in control." Frank's jaw tightened. "You don't have to do that here." She nodded once. "Then I won't." The silence that followed was heavier, but not hostile. She wasn't testing him anymore. She was deciding. Frank stood and pulled a thermal blanket from storage, laid it out on the floor near the heater. She frowned. "Why there?" You need the bed. And you. I'll be fine. She didn't press it, but she watched him again that night. As he powered down the scanner, as he slid off his boots, as he lay down without facing her. She watched, and when the lights dimmed to evening mode, she didn't say goodnight. She didn't move toward him, but when Frank rolled over in the quiet, he saw that she hadn't laid down either. She was sitting upright, blanket draped around her eyes still on him, and she looked like someone still waiting to believe this wasn't temporary. He understood that look, because deep down, he wasn't sure either, but he was going to make it real, even if the whole system turned against him. The next morning, Nyreen was already awake when Frank opened his eyes. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her feet bare and tucked beneath her. She wasn't watching him anymore. Her eyes were fixed on the cracked mirror across the room, studying her reflection like it didn't belong to her. The ambient heater cast a slow-moving glow behind her, softening the blue-purple tone of her skin. Frank sat up and rubbed the sleep from his eyes. His muscles ached from the floor, but he didn't complain. He wasn't used to sharing his space. But for some reason, her presence hadn't unsettled him. He stood, pulled on his jacket, and checked the power meter. Their consumption was up, just slightly, but enough that someone watching system logs would eventually notice. He'd have to start hiding usage. Sooner than expected, Nyreen's voice came quiet, not looking away from the mirror. You didn't touch me, even when I was unconscious on your shoulder. Frank glanced at her, then nodded. Didn't see a reason to. She finally turned her head. Most don't wait for one. Frank walked to the sink and poured a half cup of clean water. I'm not most. She didn't thank him, but she took the cup when he offered it. You need clean clothes, he said. Something that fits. We'll need to go up level. That got her attention. You want to take me out? If you stay here too long without registry data, it'll flag the structure. Low activity, suddenly showing 2 people instead of 1. The system assumes either theft or unauthorized cohabitation. And if they scan me, they won't. Not if I take the side lifts and route through the dry corridors. You've done this before. No, but I've watched how it's done. She stood, letting the blanket fall behind her. She didn't adjust the shirt that clung loosely to her hips or covered only one shoulder. She watched him instead, still testing. But the edge in her expression was softer now, more like curiosity than defense. Frank opened a locker and pulled out a weather-stained satchel, then passed her a pair of dark leggings he'd used as insulation wrap. They'll be loose. Tie them if you can. She took them without comment. As he turned to give her space, she said, What happens if we're seen? We act like I'm your handler. You keep your eyes down. Walk 2 steps behind. Don't draw attention. Nyreen was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke without emotion. I know how to do that. The market streets 2 levels up are busier during midday. Vendors shouting, cart engines sputtering, steam pouring from broken vents. They walked side by side at first. Then she shifted behind him as instructed. Her bare feet were now covered by spare field shoes, laced tightly. Her hair was tucked under a worn hood from his gear bag. She kept her head low. Frank guided them through service alleys and down in used loading ramps, weaving between the groups of workers and dockhands. No one looked twice. That was the trick. The more casually she moved, the more invisible she became. They stopped near a supply kiosk tucked behind the outer sanitation sector. Frank scanned his band and waited as the console activated. A robotic voice offered clearance options for requisitions. Civilware, thermal gear, med strips. He picked 3 items. Pants, undershirt, long coat with fiber lining. The kiosk word then dropped the bundle. He didn't ask her to change there. He led her back 2 blocks to a side entrance where the outer wall had cracked and left a blind corner. She stepped inside and changed quickly. When she came out, the change was subtle but striking. The pants clung to her form but weren't provocative. The shirt fit snug against her frame. The coat was oversized, reaching mid-thigh, but it gave her weight. Presence. She no longer looked like something displayed. She looked like someone trying to blend in. Better? Frank asked. Nyreen pulled the coat tighter. Warmer. They returned the long way, taking detours through quieter alleys and dimmer vents. Frank kept checking shadows, listening for the low whine of scanners. There were none, but he didn't relax. Once back in the unit, she took off the coat and laid it over the crate. Frank went to the console and checked their water ration logs. One spike. Yesterday. Already time-stamped and stored. He tapped the override, masked it as system cleaning. It bought them time, not safety. Nyreen sat on the bed, legs crossed, hands in her lap. "You haven't asked what they did to me," she said. Frank didn't look at her. "I didn't think it was my right to know." "You're wrong," she said. "If you're risking your life for me, then you should understand what I am." He finally turned to her. Her face was blank, but her fingers were tight on her knees. "They didn't drug me," she said. "They didn't beat me. They trained me, broke my identity in pieces. Language first, made me speak in passive tone only. Then routine, sleep on cue, rise on signal, eat when given, not before. And they used the touch command every day, until my body reacted to pressure without thought." Her breath hitched slightly. "They made obedience feel like relief." Frank said nothing, just let her speak. "It wasn't until I stopped responding that they stopped feeding me. That's when I knew I'd forgotten who I was." She looked at him directly. "Until yesterday." Frank walked over and crouched in front of her. Not close enough to touch, just close enough to meet her eye level. "I don't need details to know what matters," he said. "They didn't erase you. You're still here." Her voice was low. "For how long?" "As long as you want." She stared at him, not blinking. Then her tone changed. "You don't get aroused by me." Frank didn't flinch. "I notice you. I'm not blind, but I'm not going to use you to satisfy guilt." "What if I wanted you to?" He met her eyes. "Then I'd wait until you asked without needing to test me first." That landed like a stone. She looked down, then nodded. That night, she didn't sleep on the bed. She moved the blanket to the floor, beside his. When he lay down, she lay next to him, not touching, but close. Close enough that their breathing matched. No words were exchanged, no promises made, but the distance between them had changed, and neither one reached for the light. Frank woke to the subtle pressure of warmth at his side. The room was dim, still tinted with the soft orange glow of the heater core. No alarms, no notifications, just the sound of slow breathing. Nyreen lay beside him, not touching, but not far. She had shifted during the night, drawing slightly closer. Her leg was just near his. Her breathing was steady. Her expression relaxed. Frank didn't move, not for a long time. He studied the lines of her face in the morning quiet. The small ridge of scar tissue just under her chin, likely from a restraint collar. The faint marks across her cheekbones, sun-faded ceremonial pigments, now nearly invisible. She looked less guarded in sleep. Not soft, just free from calculation. That was new. When she stirred, she didn't flinch. She opened her eyes and looked directly at him. "You didn't move," she said. "I didn't want to wake you. You watched me." He didn't deny it. Her voice was calm. "That's allowed." Frank sat up slowly, rubbing his face. "You okay?" "I'm not sure yet." She sat up too, drawing the blanket around her. "But I didn't expect to sleep at all. That's something." He stood and crossed to the console. The registry log blinked. Minor notice. Environmental activity detected. Occupant energy usage above baseline. A routine scan. Automated. But it was the second one this week. He disabled the alert. Flagged it as a heater coil malfunction. With enough consistency, the system would stop querying. Maybe. Behind him, Nyreen spoke. That wasn't a personal message. "No. System log. Monitoring." She stood, pulling the shirt down to cover herself. Her bare feet patted across the cold floor as she approached the mirror. She tied her hair back using a stripped wire cord. Efficient. Focused. Will they come? Not yet, but they'll start noticing patterns soon. What kind? Water use. Food requisition. Heat pulses. Two people leave different chemical traces. The dome scrubbers pick up exhale variances. She turned, watching him. "You know all that? I do habitat surveys. Infrastructure audits. I've written half the incident reports for this sector. And you think you can hide me? I can slow them. Mask usage. Block low-priority scans. Eventually, someone will flag us." Her voice didn't waver. "Then we should be ready." Frank turned toward her. "Are you saying you want to stay?" Nyreen paused. "I don't have a plan," she said. I don't have a purpose yet. But this space, it doesn't feel like the others. It doesn't feel like waiting to be sold again. He didn't answer right away. He walked to the heater, adjusted the output down one notch, then crouched to fix the uneven panel. She watched him with interest. You fix things when they don't work right. It's what I do. And if the thing is broken beyond repair, I rebuild it, piece by piece. There was silence after that. Then a knock. It wasn't loud. Just 2 measured raps on the exterior panel. Standard pattern for dome maintenance crews. Frank froze. Nyreen tensed, stepping back from the mirror. Her eyes darted toward the side wall. No exit. Nowhere to hide. Frank moved quickly. He crossed the room, tapped the console twice to disable the interior camera, and opened a private channel. Unit C, 8 responding, he said. The reply crackled through the wall. Routine air filter check. Your scrubber unit pinged a delay. Should be cleared within 5 minutes. Open for inspection. Frank's mind raced. If they came inside, they'd see her. One look. That's all it would take. No need, he replied. Already cleared the intake. I'll upload the inspection record now. Copy that, the voice said. Send within 3 minutes. Frank shut the channel. His fingers flew over the interface. He copied an older inspection file from last month, modified the timestamps, replaced the scrubber data with a clean report. He spoofed the sensor log using an override code from his bureau license. The report went out. After a long pause, the panel buzzed again. Acknowledged. Stay clear of the intake panel during tomorrow's cycle. That's all. No one entered. Frank let out a slow breath. Behind him, Nyreen was still against the far wall, not breathing. He walked to her. It's okay. They're gone. Her eyes stayed locked on the door. That's what it'll feel like, isn't it? Just a knock. Then gone. Frank nodded. That's how they do it. She sank down onto the bed slowly. Her hands clenched the blanket, knuckles pale. Frank crouched in front of her. You're not going back in a cage. She looked at him, not suspiciously, just deeply. I believe you want that, she said. But you don't think it's possible. I think everything has a cost. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into the storage crate and pulled out the backup power coupler he'd been working on, set on the table, then opened the chassis to start rerouting the main output lines. What are you doing? She asked. Decoupling the heater draw, making it look like you left yesterday. That's a lie. It's survival. She sat beside him. Then, after a beat, can I help? Frank didn't look at her. Just handed her the pliers. They worked in silence, side by side. No orders. No roles. Just 2 people rewiring a lie. Later, when the fix was complete, she didn't move back to the bed. She sat beside him on the floor. Close. Not touching, but enough that he could feel the heat of her skin through his sleeve. And when she spoke again, it was soft. If I choose to stay, will I be yours? Frank turned to her. No, he said, but I'll be yours, if that's what you want. She didn't respond. Not with words. She reached for his hand, slow and deliberate, and held it in her own. And for the first time since she whispered, "Take me home," she didn't seem afraid of what came next. The next few days passed in quiet increments. Nothing dramatic. No knocks. No sirens. But the tension never fully left. Frank worked. Not officially. His bureau logs remained idle. But inside the unit, he adjusted wiring, reprogrammed energy signatures, and restructured the thermal output grid to mask dual presence. He didn't speak much while doing it. He didn't need to. Nyreen watched carefully, absorbing every move, and when he reached for tools, she was already handing them over. She never asked permission to help. She simply did. Their days settled into something like rhythm. Frank cooked. She cleaned. He patched the wall seal. She sorted his stacked gear crates and repaired 2 broken water hoses with a heat strip and a clamp. Once, he found her sitting at the console, reading archived dome layouts. She taught herself how to access maintenance overlays. When he asked her how, she just said pattern recognition and boredom. But it wasn't boredom. It was something else, something he hadn't realized she was regaining. Agency. She started choosing when she dressed, sometimes staying in the thermal shirt, sometimes wearing the fitted undershirt and pants. Once, she wore nothing under the long coat, sitting beside the heater with one leg curled beneath her. She never explained why. She didn't have to. Frank didn't comment, but he noticed. He noticed the way she moved now, less cautiously, more naturally. He noticed she slept deeper, that her hands no longer twitched at sudden noises, that she made soft sounds in her throat while thinking, tiny, reflexive hums, like music notes she didn't mean to share. One morning, she stood beside him while he worked on the purifier valves. The distance between them had closed without announcement. Her hip brushed his side. She didn't move away. Neither did he. Later that same day, a system alert arrived. Registry notice. All current bonded assets must confirm usage status within 72 hours for population audit. Failure to validate will result in reassessment scheduling. Frank read the message twice. Then again, his stomach turned. "They're checking," he said. Nyreen stepped beside him. "How bad is it? If we do nothing, the system flags you as inactive asset, a category that usually means abuse, hoarding, or misplacement. Which means they send someone? First a system query, then a review, then physical inspection." Nyreen crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. "Can we fake the validation?" "Maybe, but it'll need biometric input. They'll expect a real usage timestamp from a bonded device. That data gets cross-referenced. And if they don't get it, they flag this unit. And me." She was quiet. "Then we do it." Frank turned to her. "You understand what that means?" "Yes. They'll see activity in your name, and they'll think you used me." Frank's jaw clenched. "I don't want that on your record, even if it's a lie." Nyreen stepped close. She reached past him, typed on the console. Fast. Precise. "You won't do it," she said. "So I will." He caught her wrist. "Wait." She looked at him, unflinching. "This is my risk. You've taken enough." Frank held her gaze. She didn't blink. Her pulse under his fingers was steady. He released her. She navigated to the audit screen, bypassed the automated interface, and opened a manual input panel. "I used to write logs like these," she said. "Back when I was a translator. Everything had to look routine, functional, but still plausible." She entered her ID code, reactivated her dormant tag profile just long enough to register one logged interaction. Bonded asset, Nyreen, registry code #TX 5-147. Owner interaction log, confirmed. Usage type, private civil cohabitation, Tier 2. Notes, minor verbal interaction. No physical report required. Compliance level, standard. She closed the file. Frank stared at her. "They'll think I'm your companion," she said. "Not your prisoner. Not your property." He blinked slowly. "You really just did that." She stepped back. "I didn't do it for you." He nodded. "I know." Later that night, Frank sat near the heater again. The floor was clean now. She had scrubbed it earlier with old fabric strips and filtered water. She sat on the bed, one knee bent, hair down, damp from washing. The coat hung open. The fitted shirt clung to her chest, half-buttoned. She was warm, clean, and visibly tired. He looked at her. She didn't look away. "You're not used to being looked at like a person," he said. She responded quietly. "You're not used to being looked at all." That surprised him. She continued. "You carry silence like a second skin. It's not avoidance. It's armor." He shifted slightly. "You read people." "I had to. When I didn't, I suffered." She stood, walked to him, stopped just beside his leg. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. I never wanted you to be." Her fingers brushed his wrist. "Light. Testing. I still don't know what this is," she said. "But I want to choose it." He looked up at her. His voice didn't shake. "Then choose." Nyreen lowered herself to the floor beside him. She didn't curl up. She didn't hide. She leaned into his side, let her head rest against his shoulder, and closed her eyes. Frank stayed still for a long moment. Then, gently, he placed one hand over hers. No rush, no demand, just warmth, and something real, something that, for both of them, hadn't existed in years. Frank stood over the console, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the new system message flashing in red. Dome Sector C8. On-site verification required. Physical registry audit scheduled within 24 standard hours. Non-compliance will result in administrative review. No workaround, no override, no upload link. This time, the system wanted a face, a name, a presence in front of the bureau console downtown. It wasn't a security sweep. It was worse, routine bureaucracy. Something no one questioned because it wasn't personal, just protocol. But for them, it could mean everything unraveling. Frank backed away from the screen. His palms were sweating. His thoughts kicked into motion, calculating alternate paths, burner IDs, relocation zones. But the truth settled hard. They had no time. He turned. Nyreen was seated on the edge of the bed, one leg curled beneath her, one arm resting on the frame. She wasn't wearing the coat, just the thermal undershirt and pants, her hair loose, still damp from earlier. She looked calm, too calm. She saw his face. Something's wrong. They wanted to show up. In person. Full scan, full ID validation. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers gripped the frame tighter. They don't send people for this kind of check, Frank said. It's procedural, random selection. But once they log my presence, they'll match activity metrics. My heat use, water rate, your record. And if you don't go, they shut down the unit. Force inspection. They'll find you. Nyreen looked away for a moment. Her voice, when it came, was dry. How long do we have? Until midday tomorrow. She stood. Then we go. Frank blinked. Where? Off-grid. You've mapped the unused sectors. You said it yourself. You've surveyed half this dome. That was different. Scouting is one thing. Vanishing from the registry is another. She stepped closer, her voice steady. Frank, you bought me to save me. Now let me save us. He didn't move. His hands stayed at his sides, clenched. What's left if we run? He asked quietly. No job, no record, no access. Every day, we'll be watching the shadows. Her reply was soft. We're already doing that. She touched his wrist, gently, not guiding, inviting. I'm not afraid to live in hiding, she said. I've already lived in chains. This is better. He looked at her for a long time. Then something broke in him. Not panic, not frustration, just silence giving way to truth. I'm scared, he admitted. She nodded. Me too. He sat down. The words had drained him. His shoulders fell forward. His hands hung between his knees. Nyreen sat beside him. Not close, not far. Then she said something he hadn't expected. When they trained us, they made us practice being wanted. We were taught how to respond to a touch, how to whisper like it meant something, how to pretend we craved being seen. Frank didn't interrupt, but they never taught us what to do when someone looked at us and didn't expect anything. When someone saw us and just waited. She looked at him then, her voice quiet. You did that. His chest tightened. I didn't mean to. I know. That's why it worked. Silence again. Then, slowly, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move. Her voice came so softly he barely heard it. I want to sleep next to you tonight. Not just near you. With you. His heart thudded once. Then again. She wasn't offering. She wasn't trading. She was choosing. He looked down at her hand, resting on her thigh, fingers loose. He covered it with his own. They didn't speak. Later that night, they shared the bed. She curled against him, one leg over his. Her skin was warm against his chest, her hand tucked under his arm. She breathed slowly, steadily, her eyes half-lidded as she traced a single line across his ribs with her fingertip. No urgency, no tension. Frank wrapped one arm around her waist. He kissed her shoulder once, just once, and let the moment be whole. It wasn't about pleasure. It was about finally being seen. About two people, alone in a world designed to erase them, making space for something else. Something that, by morning, they'd have to fight to keep. And for the first time in years, neither of them wanted to be anywhere else. The unit was dark. Only the heater's low glow lit the room as Frank crouched near the floor panel, pulling back the final junction plate. His fingers were steady, but his breath was tight. Behind him, Nyreen packed their final items into a salvaged field bag. 2 thermal rations, a folded blanket, 1 data pad wiped clean of registry logs. That was all they could carry. Once the panel was loose, Frank reached into the cavity and disconnected the wall node, the link between their shelter and the dome's central system. The moment the connection severed, a faint chime sounded. Nothing dramatic, but every screen in the room blinked out. They were off-grid now. No more scans. No more power pings. No more safety net. Nyreen stood silently, watching the lights die. "That's it?" she asked. Frank nodded. "We disappear from the dome in 90 seconds. Then the system flags the unit as abandoned. Will they come?" He looked up at her. "Not fast. It's just another vacancy on their list. We'll have at least 2 days before anyone checks physically. Maybe longer." She exhaled, then crossed to the heater, kneeling beside it. She took off the coat, folded it neatly, and placed it beside the wall. She didn't put it back on. She turned to him. The soft light from the dying heater played along her skin, deep violet, smooth, faintly glowing now that she was warm, clean, and not hiding. Her chest rose evenly, no tension in her limbs. She looked free. Frank rose to his feet and stepped closer. Neither of them said a word. She reached for his hand, laced her fingers through his, and rested her forehead lightly against his chest. "We won," she said. He let his chin rest against the top of her head. "It doesn't feel like a win yet. It will, once we leave." She pulled back slightly, reached into the collar of her shirt. Her fingers found the edge of the subdermal registry implant, the one they deactivated days ago. She looked him in the eyes. "Do it," she whispered. Frank hesitated. "You're sure?" Her voice was steady. "It's the last thing that doesn't belong to me." He pulled the tool from his belt pouch, a low-power pulse cutter, designed for cable removal, not surgery. But the layer was thin. She tilted her head, exposed the base of her neck. Frank made the cut carefully. The tag came free with a small flicker of light, then dimmed in his hand. She didn't flinch. When it was done, he set it gently in a cloth wrap and placed it into the waste chamber. Nyreen turned to him, her voice softer now. "That was the last part of who I was that they gave me." He didn't say anything, just pulled her into his arms. She leaned into him fully now, chest to chest, hip to hip. No barriers, no need for them. They lay down on the floor together, the last warmth of the heater fading as they tangled under the thermal blanket. Skin to skin, no urgency, no performance, just presence. Frank brushed her hair back as she rested her head against his chest, her legs tucked over his. Her fingers traced lazy lines across his shoulder, and he let his hand rest gently along the curve of her back. She looked up at him calm. "I feel whole." He kissed her once, slow, certain. And when they made love that night, it wasn't about relief. It wasn't about reclaiming. It was about arrival. There was no shame, no fear, no transaction, only consent, only breath, only warmth between two people who had lived in silence and were now finally allowed to be heard, in each other's skin, in each other's presence. And when morning came, they rose together, dressed, packed, and stepped out into the maintenance corridor with nothing but what they carried and who they had become. Frank didn't look back, and Nyreen didn't need to. She'd already left that place behind the moment she said, "Take me home." Now, finally, she was there. The sky above the outer ridge wasn't real, but it looked close enough. They had made it to the collapsed perimeter of Sector K, long since abandoned after a methane leak forced evacuation a decade prior. Most people thought the area was toxic. Frank knew better. He'd surveyed it once, years ago, and logged it as structurally unsound but breathable with filter supplementation. No one read the fine print. Now it was theirs. They'd repaired a small outpost pod, rerouted a power cell to keep the interior warm. It wasn't much: metal walls, scavenged bedding, a solar mesh canopy barely holding together overhead. But it was safe and quiet, and nobody came this far anymore. Frank stepped outside into the filtered light, adjusting the old solar panel by a few degrees. The wind here was dry, soft. He could hear himself breathe, could hear her inside, humming, just softly, as she folded up the new blankets they'd bartered for days earlier from a blackline trader who never even looked her in the eyes. She was different now, more upright, more intentional. Her voice had gained weight again. Her footsteps sounded sure. She laughed sometimes, not often, but when she did, she didn't pull it back. He turned when she appeared in the doorway. She wore only one of his shirts, unzipped, open in the collar. No pants, just bare legs and the confidence to stand that way without fear. "We have water stored for 2 days," she said. He nodded. "I rotated the panel. Should hold charge through tomorrow." She crossed to him slowly, eyes fixed on his. Her expression was soft, but serious. "Come inside." He followed her without a word. Inside the pod, the heat was steady. The solar filament glowed amber along the upper wall, casting a low golden light across the bedding. The air smelled of dust, clean metal, and faintly of her skin, something sweet and grounding. She sat down and waited. He came to her, dropped his shirt, sat close. Their knees touched. "I think," she said, "that I want you to touch me tonight." Frank blinked. "We already—" "No," she said quietly. "That was closeness. That was healing." She reached for his hand, placed it slowly over her heart. "This is mine now. This choice." Frank nodded, slow. She lay back, pulling him with her. The blanket fell aside. She opened the shirt fully, letting it slide from her shoulders, then tugged at his belt, deliberate but gentle. No rush. Her eyes never left his. Their bodies met slowly, carefully. She let him kiss her, neck, collarbone, chest, his mouth moving down her skin with reverence, not hunger. She guided his hands lower, arching into his touch, not for performance, but for presence. Every sigh, every shift was real. No pretense. He slid between her thighs, pausing as their bodies aligned. "Is this what you want?" he whispered. She nodded once, breathless. "Yes, all of it." Their bodies moved slowly at first, careful, paced, adjusting to rhythm rather than chasing it. Her hands gripped his back, then his shoulders, then his face. She looked into him as he moved inside her, not to measure him, but to meet him. Their breathing deepened. Sweat gathered on skin. She wrapped her legs around him, drawing him closer, not out of need but want. Her lips brushed his. He kissed her deeply, with weight. There were no roles here, no language of ownership or performance. Only two people, moving in time, wrapped in each other's silence and sound. When she gasped softly, he slowed. When she urged him deeper, he answered. When she trembled, he held her. They reached the edge together. No peak like a crashing wave, just a long, slow current of release that pulsed through them both, until their bodies finally stilled. He didn't move. She didn't speak. They just stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, breathing shared. After a long time, she exhaled. "This time," she whispered, "I felt everything." Frank kissed her brow. "I did too." She smiled. Small, honest. And they curled together in the warmth of the pod, limbs tangled, no weight between them. No shame, no fear, just a future finally chosen and held.